In November 1995, you were stood in the dock contemplating a possible 30-year sentence.
That's right.
You were just 16 years old. How did it come to this?
By the time I was 16 years old, I was fully immersed in gang culture. I had dropped out of school and I had completely got caught up in the gang lifestyle. The gang was my family. That was my sense of identity. And the lifestyle, I guess I was living at that time, I felt more comfortable in that than, let's say, in school or anywhere else. But the streets was my life. And I found myself committing a series of crimes that eventually led to the crime that got me sent to prison a bit later on in life. So, yeah.
So you obviously didn't get 30 years because you're here. So what happened? You pleaded guilty?
Yeah, so I was charged in 1995 with one count of unlawful use of a weapon, and 6 counts of aggravated battery. And that was considered a felony crime at the time. And I was looking at 15 to 30 years in the state of Illinois in the 90s because Chicago was so rough. They were giving out really harsh sentences to try to set an example. So as a 16-year-old kid, I committed this violent crime. And I was initially looking at 15 to 30 years. But because I committed it, I did it, I ended up pleading guilty. And the judge was lenient and gave me the minimum sentence, which was 6 years.
Still bad enough.
That's still a lot, especially as a 16-year-old boy. You don't see like the ending in the beginning. You don't see when is this going to end. So it was when I read that sentence to me, everything just felt like it went black. Like am I dreaming? And
horrible.
It was awful.
Can we backtrack a bit though?
Yeah.
Because you grew up in a loving family.
Yep.
Middle son of 3 boys.
Yep.
So what went wrong back then?
Yeah, as an adult, I guess I had time to kind of reflect on what happened because my parents did everything that they could to keep their boys safe. And we would often move from one neighborhood to the other just to try to get away from the violence. It just so happened because of our social economic situation, we just found ourselves in really rough areas. But I think a lot of it was peer pressure from the community. You didn't want to feel like the oddball out, and there was a point in time in my life where I was bullied. And no one likes to be bullied. But also, I was really bad in school.
Yeah, well, tell us what happened at school.
So school,
because that's where the bullying happened.
So school was an interesting situation. And if I can look back, I would say that my experience in school is what really made me look to the streets.
Yeah.
So I was told by teachers that I was dumb, that I wasn't smart. And as a kid, I just remember hearing that and just laughing it off, right? But you internalize that kind of stuff. And there was this one teacher, they made a cubicle in the classroom for me. And so whenever they felt like I was being distracting or whenever they felt like, I wasn't focusing or paying attention, they put me there. And I would be there all day. Even when the kids went to lunch, I would be in this cubicle, there was a wall in front of me and then there was like 3 cubicles, one on each side and one in the back. And I mean, all I would do is just like play with my pencils or just draw. But it's almost as if they forgot I was there. But,
And again, if you think about what that was doing to you inside and
Right.
your sense of self.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I'm feeling like weeping for that small boy.
yeah, yeah.
Because it was when you were really quite young, wasn't it? 8, 9, 10?
Yeah, I was around 8 or 9 years old. But the reason I found myself just really struggling in school was because I was literally blind and deaf.
Yeah.
So I couldn't hear. And so I couldn't hear what the teacher was saying.
So that was
And-
what, chronic infection? Sorry.
Yeah,
Medical
it was a
coming
chronic ear infection
Okay,
that I
which
had.
wasn't getting treated.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't, but no one tested me. No one tested me for eyesight. I mean, I couldn't see the board. And so I was struggling in school, and people, my teachers just thought it was behavioral.
Yep.
You know, they were in a school with majority black kids, and they was just like, well, that's just how they are, you know. At least that's how I felt. Like, they didn't care about, you know, my education. They didn't care, okay, what's going on, what's wrong. Let's see if we can figure this out. No, there's a cubicle.
Okay.
No, Tobias, you're stupid. You're dumb.
Yeah. So now we can understand why you drop out of school at 14, 13?
Yeah.
No qualifications, no conviction that you've got any ability at all.
No, that's
up
it.
top.
Yeah. And what my school did was they would pass me from one grade to the next. And I would get to the end of every school year with Fs.
Which
I
meant
failed. I
Okay.
completely failed. And so by the time I got to high school, I realized I didn't know anything. Because I mean, there was just things, there was foundational things that just wasn't there. In high school, there was the social pressure, but then the academic pressure, I was just like, it's just way too much for me.
You're a lost boy.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah. That's it.
And then you can see how ripe you were with all those internal needs
Yep.
to be picked up by a gang.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, it's classically, but sadly, a very familiar story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to when you're 16
Yep.
and you've just landed in prison with a 6-year sentence, which must have felt like a lifetime to a 16-year-old. You're scared, angry, frightened. How did you cope? What did you do?
Well, all of those emotions that you mentioned, I had to suppress.
Okay, it all had to be kept hidden.
It all had to be kept in. Because you're going into an environment where if people saw weakness, they would take advantage of you. And I was raised with this mantra, like, you never let anyone take advantage of you. Because if you do, then that's it. You know, you've kind of lost your will and your freedom to fight back. People will do whatever they want.
Yeah, you get walked all over.
Yeah, you get run over. And so I knew what I had to do. Now, by this time, I've already adopted to that sort of street mentality. But initially, I mean, there was fear. There was fear. I would hear stories of people who were in prison and they would get shanked, they would get stabbed, and you know, all of these crazy things. But as a 16-year-old kid, you kind of have to learn how to suppress that fear and kind of carry over that street mentality into prison.
But you did, you found members of your Blackstones gang there.
Yep.
So you managed to recreate your identity.
That's it. Yeah.
To rebuild that fear, respect.
That's it.
Again.
Yeah.
And that went on for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And with a lot of bad behavior from you.
Yeah. Those first few years in prison was awful.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I had to go in and prove myself all over again.
Yeah.
And so the gang that I was a part of, I mean, I remember when I first came there, they had to tell me to calm down a little bit, because I was just fiery. I was fighting everybody. I was fighting.
And I guess there's some kind of delicate balance between the gangs at the prison, and they don't want.
Right, yeah, especially for guys who's been there for a while.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're enjoying some sense of peace and stability.
Kind of a truce.
Exactly. And then I come in and I'm like, no, let's send it up. Let's show.
So they had to sit on you a bit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Your gangster paradise starts to feel more like a gangster hell.
Yeah.
The line is, death ain't nothing but a heartbeat away.
Yeah.
And something began to shift inside for you.
Yeah.
What was going on in your heart and mind?
So there were a lot of things that were shifting. One, I just got tired of being in trouble.
Yeah.
All the time, finding myself in and out of the hole for fights.
The hole?
Yeah, the hole, which is like seg.
Yeah, can you explain what that is?
Yeah. Seg. So the hole in I guess American lingo is like seg.
So in UK parlance, with seg is short for segregated unit or care and separation unit.
Yeah.
So basically, it's where you're put in solitary.
It's a prison within the prison. Yeah.
And you're stuck in a cell all by yourself, and you've got no telly,
no telly, no nothing. It's just you, a pillow, a sheet, and a blanket, and a jumpsuit. That's it. And I got tired of that.
Yep.
I got tired of being just in that lifestyle. And there was a number of things that I started seeing happening where I just felt like, okay, this love affair that I had with the gang lifestyle was just not all that it cracked up to be.
So you found yourself starting to look into the future.
Yeah.
And you were being groomed by Life for Gangsters for your release.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and then there was going to be more of the same on the outside. That's
it. Yeah, there was one of the gang leaders in one of the prisons that I was in. I mean, of all the Blackstones that was there, I had the shortest sentence, and he sat down with me because he knew some of the people that I knew, and he was like, look, when you go out, I want you, when you release, I want you to go out there, and I want you to take over this set, I want you to talk to these people. And I mean, to a young kid, what he was promising me, if the gangster lifestyle is all you have, I mean, that's like hitting the lottery. I mean, you were promised prestige, you were promised power, you were promised money, and with all of that came the ladies, came the girls, multiple girls, but I'm looking at this guy telling me this, and I see he has no teeth in his mouth, right? He's doing a life sentence because of the 3-strike rule. And he was young, relatively young at the time. He was like around mid-30s. But he looked like he was 50 years old. And I just remember looking at him and saying, Dad, is there something better than this? I mean, I wasn't excited about what he was talking with me about. And most kids in my position, sitting down talking with the general of the Blackstones, they would feel honored to have that proposition and to have the connections that he was going to be giving me. But it's like, a part of me didn't want that. Yeah. I didn't want that. I didn't want to look like him, toothless at 30,
And facing a lifetime in prison.
Exactly, facing a lifetime in prison.
And yet still pursuing this gangster paradise.
Still active in the gang, and it's like he brought into their lifestyle. And that became his permanent identity. You get trapped in that world and that lifestyle. And once you get to a certain age, you're just like, well, this is all there is. I mean, no one's going to hire you. At least that's what you're saying to yourself. You don't have any formal education. You spend all your life, selling drugs. So what am I going to do? This is all I have.
This is all I can do.
This is all I can do. And I find myself in a hole because of a riot that I was involved in. And a lot of people got hurt. And I was looking at quite a bit of extra time because of that riot. So while I'm in my cell waiting, I was given a Bible to read. And I found myself reading this Bible for the very first time. But I encountered Christ. I was looking at the life that I was living. And then I was looking at the life that Jesus was offering me. And I was saying that the life that he was offering me was much better than the life that I was living. And it was there in that pit of despair, in that dark, lonely place, that I gave my life to Jesus, that I just said yes to him, and I stopped running, and I gave my life to Christ.
So the place of despair became a place of hope.
Absolutely.
And something new was born in you.
Yep.
I think you told me you wept and wept.
Yeah, I from the moment I started reading the Gospel of John, I just couldn't stop crying. Because there was something about this person, Jesus, and how he interacted with people who were just like me, right?
Yeah.
People who were broken, lost, confused, hopeless. And he gave them hope. He changed their lives. And I was like, hey, if Jesus could offer forgiveness to this person, if Jesus can change this person's life, then could he change my life? And he did.
So you feel this burden lifting, you feel this sense of hope being regenerated, and that the future is nothing like as black as you had thought it could only be.
Yep.
But you did get extra time. You actually got something called 666. Do you want to explain what that is to us?
Yeah, so 666 was 6 months added to my prison sentence, 6 months in the hole, and 6 months of revoked privileges. So revoked privileges means that, I had to give up my 13-inch color TV. I couldn't buy cigarettes. I couldn't buy soap, commercial soap. So I just essentially was relying on the state for everything. So all of the money that people would send me, like my parents, that would often be used to buy commissary. So revoked privileges meant that, I couldn't do that. I couldn't, just go out and...
So this was quite a test.
It was.
For someone who had experienced a life-changing moment.
Yep.
How did you use the rest of the time in the hole?
So
no TV.
Yeah.
No telephone. No cellmate.
Yep.
What did you do?
So when they sent me to Pontiac Correctional, after I got my sentence, they sent me to a prison called Pontiac Correctional, which was a maximum security prison. You were locked down 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And for some people, that would have been hard. But for me, as a young Christian, oh man, I loved it.
Really?
I absolutely loved it. And because I just used that time to just read the Bible and just pray. And my routine was push-ups and scripture. So I would wake up in the morning, have my devotionals. I think I was doing like 500 push-ups a day. But I just enjoyed being in the Word of God. And when I got tired, I would just hit the floor. And then I sleep. And then I wake up. And that was just my rhythms throughout the entire day. And I was just falling in love with Jesus.
Okay.
Getting to know this person, Jesus, getting to know his word. It was a beautiful thing. And so people around me were cracking. Almost every day I would hear people screaming.
Banging on the door.
And guards coming and taking them out to mental institutions because people were banging their heads on the walls, and they had to come in and just tie them up. And you saw and you heard some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But for me, that was a shelter. That was a safe space because God was doing something in my heart. He was building me up spiritually and physically. And so that's how I used that 6 months in the hole.
Okay. And by the time you left the hole,
Yep.
the segregation unit, you were a changed man.
I was a completely
We could
changed
say.
man. Yep.
But now it's going to be put to the test a little. From my experience working in prison, it's not actually unusual for offenders to get religion.
Yep.
I've heard some fairly cynical comments about it. I've seen myself, people try to get their act together.
Yep.
I've seen them try and re-engage with their religion, trying to rebuild their capital with God.
Right.
But it often doesn't last.
Yeah.
So by the time you left the hole, segregation unit, you felt like a changed man. But obviously now you've got to go out there and re-engage with the prison community. And you've got a reputation. They don't know what's happened to you. And there's something about wanting to exit the gang now.
Right.
Because you can't carry on in that. You want to change that lifestyle. So what happened? Because exiting a gang is not easy, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, in prison, particularly in Illinois, which is the state that I was living in, you need your gang to survive. Your gang, is your protection in prison. And so, I was essentially giving that up, and I knew that was going to be hard. But then there's the other issue that I had to deal with. You just don't get out of a gang. No. So usually the way into a gang is through a violation. And usually the way out is through a violation. The violation is you get beat up, you stand on the wall, and you let a few people punch you, and the moment you drop to the ground, people will beat you for like 5 minutes. And so I've known people who have gone through that, and they didn't survive. And some people, they walked away just badly beaten and physically scarred. So I knew that was what was awaiting for me. But the question is, how do you know I was changed? I was willing to count that cost. So there was a situation that happened when I was in Pontiac. And when I was in Pontiac, I want to say I was like 2 months in. And here I am sitting on my bed. No one knows who I am. I never go out to the yard. We would usually have at least an hour optional time in the yard to just get some I never went out, ever. So I'm in my bed and I am reading the Bible. And there was this guy, he's sweeping the gallery. And he walks past my cell, and he throws in my cell this milk carton. And in this milk carton, there's a little letter from a guy named Fox, who is one of the generals of the Blackstones in Pontiac Correctional. And in this letter, he's saying, look, I heard about what happened at the last prison, about me getting out of the gang. And he's like, I wonder if we can just talk about that, if you wouldn't mind meeting me on the yard on Saturday. So I get that letter on Monday. And I just start praying.
Because you knew what it meant.
I knew exactly what it meant. But God was doing something marvelous in my heart, that the thought of me just giving all of that up and turning away from that just created this tension. I'm like, well, I don't want to get violated. I don't want to get beat up. But if I don't stand up to the gang now, then I'm stuck here. I'll never get out. And so I just started praying. And for the first time, I started this thing called fasting, which is, one thing you don't do in prison, because you get 3 meals. It's not like if you miss a meal, you can just go to the cupboard and get a snack. But I gave up a few of my meals, man, because I just wanted God to speak to me. Lord, show me, what should I do? And God gave me this word in the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 16:6, that says, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. And I felt as if God was saying, go out there, but I'm going to go before you. And so a few days later, I write this guy Fox back and I say, yeah, I'm happy to meet you out in the yard. Saturday rolls around. The guard was about to walk past my door. He asked, so I 819, which is my cell number, do you want to go out? And I was like, yeah. He was shocked. I'm like, whoa. So I put my hands through the bars. He put the chains on me, wrapped chains around my waist, and he carried me out to the yard. Now, mind you, I have no idea who this guy Fox is or what he looks like. So they put me in this big cage. They take the chains off of me. And there's just this sea of guys out here. They're playing cards, they're playing basketball, and I don't know what to do. So the first thing I do is put my back up against the gate. And as I'm standing there, there's this short, really stocky guy. He starts walking over towards me, and he says, are you Flintstone? Which was my street name. And I said, yeah. He was like, okay, I'll be with you shortly. He finished up his basketball game, and then after that, he started walking over there towards me. And then I see a group of other guys just coming out of nowhere, just walking behind him. And he looks back at them and he says, wait, as if to say, let me talk to him first. See what's going on. So he approaches me and he's like, look, man, I heard about what happened in Shawnee. He's like, tell me. So I told him. And the moment I start talking, there's this incredible sense of boldness that came over my life. I said, look, this is what happened. But when I was in that jail cell, I found Jesus. I gave my life to, and it's almost as if I wasn't talking. Okay. You know, it just felt otherworldly, like
the fear went.
Yeah, the fear went completely away. But what I began to notice was how his countenance began to change as I started talking about how Jesus was changing my life and what he was doing to me in that jail cell, how he was just taking out all of this nasty stuff that was in my heart, giving me a heart of love. And I just remember at the end of my talk, he looked at me and he said, look, man, I respect you. He was like, I'm serving a life sentence for the gang. No one writes me. No one sends me money. He's like, my son is out there. He's gang banging. He's following in my footsteps. I can't be there for him. He's in prison. He's like, you have an opportunity to go out there and to make a difference. He's like, I was sent to violate you. But he was like, look, man, I'm sticking my life out on the line for you. He's like, I want you to go out there and I want you to make a difference. He's like, but if I ever see you in here again, I'm going to kill you. And I was like, deal.
Yeah. So that was a pretty wow moment.
That was a pretty wow moment.
Brand new Christian.
Yeah, and from that moment on, he called his guys over and we just started talking. He was like, this is, Flintstone. He was like, Flintstone knows these people. And I just got a chance to share with them the gospel. But I remember going back to that cell and my heart was just full of praise. I just fell on my knees and just started weeping and crying and thanking God. He went before me and he fought my battles for me. If you trust me, I'll fight your battles for you. And I felt as if that was what God was saying. And I needed that lesson because after that 6 months, I was going sent back out to general population where I was going to encounter my gang. I was going to be without them. But I needed to learn that lesson in trust. And God showed me in that moment that when my ways please him, when I'm walking upright before him, That was his promise to me. And it's not a general promise. I mean, Jesus, right? He pleased the Lord and his enemies crucified him. But I felt like in that moment, that was God's promise to me. It's like, you just got to trust me. And so, yeah, I ended up leaving 6 months, that hole in 6 months, after 6 months in general population. And I
think
was
we
just...
call that ordinary location, basically back on the
Yeah,
prison
yeah.
wing
They sent me to another prison.
with other people, yeah.
Yeah, where it was, I was still locked up, but, I had freedom to go out and to
And you
do
got
things.
privileges again.
Yeah, I got my privileges again.
So, Tobias, what I'm hearing is that experience above, I mean, I'm sure you had many experiences personally in the whole, with this God that you were getting to know. But that for you must have been like cast iron evidence that this was real.
Yeah.
And God could deliver.
Yep.
And that faith was for real.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, so you knew that in your own heart, without a doubt, but I'm wondering what other people would have seen.
Right.
So what, you were this changed man.
Yeah.
What would they have seen? I mean, you'd previously been known as the ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
Which I think is code for you had a very short fuse.
Yeah.
Did you never lose your temper again?
I would like to say that I never lost my temper again. But initially, I was cool. I was cool and calm. In fact, when they sent me from Pontiac to the other prison, which was general population, medium security prison, I actually met a friend of mine that I grew up with on the streets. And, he came in to do the gang handshake, and I was like, nah, man, that's not me anymore. But he noticed a change. He noticed that my demeanor was a lot more calm. I was a lot more at peace. So there was an obvious change that he was able to discern. I mean, I wasn't, every word that I used to use was a cuss word, And so even the way that I talked was different.
Different, yeah.
And so, I think people were able to notice a change. But there was a moment in prison, in this new prison that I found myself in, where I did lose my temper. And I get this cellmate who, he just has a hard time with me, right? He doesn't like the fact that I'm always in my cell and I'm always just there reading the Bible or watching TV. Apparently, before I came, he had the cell all to himself, and he would do his thing, but I was there all the time, so he couldn't do his thing. He goes out one day. He goes out of the cell. This was when we had free time. And he comes back in and he sees me there, and I'm sitting on the bed and I'm watching TV. And he says, asks if I can turn the TV off. And I said, I'm watching it. And so he just turns my TV off. And so I calmly get off the bunk bed and I turn the TV back on. And then I get back on my bed. And then I sit down and start watching it. And then he turns it off again. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, you never let anyone take advantage of you. And so I was like, okay, here we go. My heart is beating really fast. And here's a guy, he knows me for being a Christian. He sees me read. But in that moment, I'm just like, I don't care. So I cut the light off. I locked the cell gate, and I had some words for him. And I said, man, if you turn my TV off again, this is what's going to happen. I didn't say that. I said some other things.
We'll guess the rest. We'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I said some other things. And as I was saying that, I was taking my shirt off because I was ready to go. And his whole demeanor changed. His whole demeanor changed. And then I turned the light back because I saw he didn't want any problems after that.
So he backed right down.
He backed away.
Mm.
I cut the light back on, turned the TV back on, and sat down on the bed. But I felt bad about that.
I was going to say, you've won his fear respect.
Yeah, I won his
Back.
respect. And it's a shame that I had to get to that level in order to get his respect.
Yeah. But that was the old Tobias.
Right.
It was the old mechanism for getting respect.
Exactly.
So how did it make you feel once you realized what had happened?
I felt awful.
You felt awful. Okay.
Because I felt like I had failed God. I was like, man, I seen God already do some incredible things in my life. And in this moment of weakness, right, I lacked that trust. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, like, this guy sees me reading the Bible. He sees me keeping a clean nose. So he feels like he can just turn my TV off and just take advantage of me. And because I'm a Christian, right, I'm not going to do anything. And in my mind, I'm like, well, if I give him that space to do that, then who knows what else he's going to do. So I was like, I got to nip this in the bud.
Okay.
I had to resort back to my old self in order to win his respect. But I remember just really wrestling with that.
Yep.
And I just felt guilty. I felt ashamed. I was like, man, God, I'm so sorry. I didn't trust you. Lord, I just felt bad. And it got to a point where I ended up apologizing.
Good.
To
Okay.
him.
So you felt you had to go and say sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't immediately. I mean, it took a few days because once I got riled up, I mean, I wasn't going to say I'm sorry immediately. I was still a young Christian. So there was still some things, that I was working through. And so it took a while for me to get to that place where I was like, man, listen, I'm sorry for losing my cool with you. I'm sorry for the things that I said. I shouldn't have said that. And he was just like, wow. He was shocked. And if anything, that apology just gave him a lot more respect for me. And that was something that I wasn't expecting.
So what did you learn from that, Tobias?
I learned that I just have to trust God with my emotions. I have to trust God with the things that I was feeling.
Yeah.
And instead of reacting, I should have just had a conversation with this guy, talked to him, maybe understood why he was so frustrated. Maybe we could have worked something out. I could have let God lead me in that direction, right?
But then having lost it,
right,
and then feeling convicted, and then apologizing, which must have left you feeling like you were making yourself quite vulnerable.
Oh yeah,
like you're giving him your vulnerability.
I
mean, it must have violated every kind of old way of pattern of thinking.
Right. Yeah.
But what did you learn from what happened when you showed your weakness, or you gave him your weakness, and he had this completely positive response? What landed for you with that?
Yeah, I mean I think if I can look back on that time now, I think what I would say I learned from that experience is that sometimes you being vulnerable doesn't always necessitates the kind of response that I was expecting. That my vulnerability changed him in some way. Yeah. That he was able to see something different. And he responded. Like, I wasn't expecting that response, but I was willing to take whatever, response he was going to give, to me after that. But that, I wasn't expecting. It's almost as if he needed to see that vulnerability. He needed someone to say to him, I'm sorry, as much as I needed to say to him,
I'm sorry,
that I was sorry.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that out of giving him your vulnerability,
right,
instead of being frightened of you, he started to feel safe with you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I mean, what a lesson.
Yeah, I mean,
it's that kind of upside downness, isn't it?
Yep.
And you actually went on to basically get on pretty well together.
Yeah, we weren't besties, don't get me wrong. We weren't best friends, but he ended up having a lot of respect for me. So by the time I left that prison, to go home.
Yeah.
We hugged, we shook hands, and he was like, man, I wish you all the best. And yeah, I mean, we ended on a really good note. And who knows what God did in his life.
Who knows? Indeed.
From just our short time with each other.
So that actually brings us to the point of your release.
Yeah.
Nicely. I'm just wondering, release is a very difficult time, isn't it? It's quite a triggering time.
Yeah.
We used to call the prison the brick mother.
Yeah.
Because you lose all that certainty, that routine,
Yeah.
that containment on release. And you'd been there for 3.5 years now.
Right.
And you're going out to the big wide world.
Mm-hmm.
How did you cope? What happened on release?
So when you're looking at your release date and you're 24 hours away from it, there's nothing but excitement. I mean, I'm thinking about my mom's home cooking. I'm thinking about White Castle's burgers. My audience may have no idea what that is, but White Castle's was a really popular restaurant back in Chicago. I'm thinking about my girlfriend. I'm thinking of all of these things and people that I'm going home to, and so I am just excited. And so I took this course. It was like a 2-week course on how to prepare for release, how to go in for an interview, and the thing they just kept driving home was like dress for success. And so, I'm feeling prepared for the release. And so I leave prison, and the first few days are wonderful. I mean, we're just partying, I'm catching up with people, but then real life happens. I'm realizing that no one is wanting to hire me because I have this prison record. And there was a part of me that wanted to lie on my application because I would get to this dreaded question about, have I committed a felony record? But I was like, man, I want to handle this whole process with integrity.
Yeah.
And so I didn't lie. And so I would always check it. And so whenever I would get rejected, then I just made that connection between me having a prison record and me being honest about me having a prison record. And when I knew that it was because of my prison record was when I went to McDonald's. I put in an application for McDonald's, right? I put on a 3-piece suit to go in for a McDonald's interview. And I carried a briefcase with me because I wanted to look as professional as I possibly. I wanted to give every appearance that I was changed. Go through the interview, thought I aced it, get a call. Nope. I got rejected from McDonald's. I'm like, man. So it was discouraging.
Yeah.
It was really discouraging.
So who finally gave you a job, and what was it?
So eventually, what ended up happening was my dad, who is a pastor,
Okay.
he gave me a job working at his church. Cleaning toilets. That was my job. So I would clean toilets, I would clean up after the Sunday service, and guess what, Celia? I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And part of the reason I loved it was because God was showing me grace. It wasn't my ideal job, but God was teaching me so much through it. And one of the things that I struggled with as an early Christian was this idea or concept of grace.
Yes.
I didn't understand grace because in my mind, I was like, God saved me from all of this, I got to repay him. I have to give my life in such a way that shows God that I'm thankful for everything that he's done for me. But when real life started happening, I realized that, man, I still struggled with sin. So there were moments and times where I would fall into sin, particularly lust, and I would beat myself up because of it. And I always felt like, man, this is it. God's done with me. He's done with forgiving me. And I remember having a conversation with my dad about this. And my father said, son, God didn't save you to lose you. He didn't save you to lose you. But he saved you to keep you. God knew all of the struggles that you would go through. But he sent his spirit to help you through it all. You just have to understand grace. Grace. The forgiveness that God showed you in prison, you didn't deserve it. He just gave it to you. And so the forgiveness that you're asking God for now, he freely gives it to you. Yeah. You still don't deserve it. So there's nothing that I can do, that will make God love me more or less. So I can go weeks with just being perfect. Really? Or trying to be perfect.
Share the secret.
Yeah. I can go weeks of not struggling with certain sins and temptations and feel, but God would love me no less than if I had a bad week where I struggled with sin and temptation. So in other words,
I think there's something really beautiful about this, because it's like that renewed relationship between father and son was actually the means to understanding your relationship now with your heavenly Father and being a child of God.
No, absolutely.
And this was your new identity.
Absolutely.
And it was gift.
Exactly. And my dad just didn't teach that to me, but he modeled that to me.
So you eventually, the church got support together and sent you off to college, is that right?
That's it.
Where you met your lovely wife, Angela, and you have 3 adorable daughters, whom I have met. And you came out of college with a degree in theology. I'd love to see your teachers' faces. And you eventually became a pastor. Yeah. And you obviously got restored relationships with your family. But just thinking about relationships, was there anybody that you knew from your gangster days that you reconnected with or remained in contact with after you became a Christian? And how has that played out?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So there are a few people that I still keep in touch with. But there's a lot of people that I used to know that still keeps in touch with my family, and so they know what I'm doing. And whenever I'm in Chicago, if I have the opportunity, I like to visit those people. But a lot of the people that I used to really gangbang with, a lot of them have died.
Really?
Some of them are in prison, but there's a core group of those people that I was really close with. They're still alive, and I've just lost connection with them. I can't find them anywhere. But I want to. I want to reconnect with those guys. But they know about my story. They know that God changed my life. I still have family back home in Chicago. Like my younger brother, he still, he loves the Lord. He still keeps in touch with people on the streets. And occasionally he would run into people who knew me. But I always tell him to keep a lookout for 3 people, because it is those 3 people that I really would love to connect with, because they were like my family. Yeah. And if there was anybody that I would want to share this life, this Christ life with, it's with them.
Tobias, it's been a privilege to hear your story. Thank you very much.
It's been a privilege being here.